My mom threatened not to attend my wedding if I didn't let my stepdad walk me down the aisle instead of my uncle. But then she regretted it because she lost the opportunity of a lifetime with a special guest I invited at just 26 years old. I'm getting married to my boyfriend of 28, who I have been with for 3 years. We have been engaged for the last 7 months, and last week I asked my uncle to walk me down the aisle. My uncle, who is 55, is my dad's older brother, and has been practically the only father figure in my life since my biological dad died when I was just 4 years old. I barely have any memories of him. My mom, who is 48, is a hard-working woman, and as a real estate agent, she had to be away for long hours, so I spent a lot of time with my uncle and his family. Honestly, I think of my uncle, my aunt, and my cousins as my close family. I love my mom, don't get me wrong, and I appreciate everything she has done for me throughout my life because I know it couldn't have been easy raising me without her husband. But I also feel a strong bond with my uncle and his family. When I asked him to walk me down the aisle, he agreed without hesitation, and we were both really happy about it. However, when I told my mom, she wasn't very happy with my decision. She said I should have at least consulted her before making such an important decision because she had hinted to my stepdad that I would ask him to do it and he might feel hurt. To set the record straight, my stepdad has only been in my life for the past 8 years. While we get along fine, we aren't particularly close, so I don't understand why my mom would think I would ask him. I don't see him as a father figure. To me, he's just my mom's husband. Maybe I would have considered it if he had tried to be more involved in my life. But that never happened, so I don't see why I should feel bad for not asking him. My mom and my stepdad started dating 8 years ago and have been married for 5, so I wasn't exactly a child when I met him. Unlike my uncle, he never took an active role as a father in my life. I explained all of this to my mom, but she was still unhappy and insisted I ask my stepdad to replace my uncle because she thought my uncle would be more understanding. But she had already hinted certain things to my stepdad and didn't want him to feel excluded. I don't see why it's my responsibility to make him feel included, but I stood my ground and told my mom it was not going to happen. I thought my uncle deserved to walk me down the aisle, and it was my wedding, so ultimately it was my choice. This happened 3 days ago, and while we were on the phone, she just hung up without bothering to discuss it further with me. When I said this was my decision and my mind couldn't be changed, I thought that would be the end of the discussion. But later that day, she came over and started up with the same topic again. She wanted me to replace my uncle with my stepdad to walk me down the aisle because she thought it would make him feel better, and eventually we could build a better relationship. It was quite exhausting because I was already busy with work and wedding preparations, and this was the last thing I needed on my plate. I was too agitated to talk to her. Our voices were raised and the arguments began to heat up. She was extremely stubborn, and I wasn't going to give in, so we just kept going in circles. At one point, she thought it would be a good idea to threaten me, saying she wouldn't come to the wedding if I didn't ask my stepdad to walk me down the aisle and make my uncle step aside. I got really angry because this was my own mother trying to use threats to say she wouldn't attend my wedding, one of the most important days of my life, over something like this. It was very clear to me that my stepdad's feelings were more important to her than mine. So, in the heat of the moment, I told her she was free not to attend my wedding, and since she made that decision, I guessed she wouldn't want to meet a very special guest I had invited just for her. I had been planning to surprise her on my wedding day by introducing her to this amazing woman. The guest I'm referring to is practically a legend in real estate. She runs one of the largest firms in the city, and my mom has always admired her and was looking for a chance to work with her since she planned to start her own business. It turns out that she is a close friend of my mother-in-law since they know each other from college. When I discovered that connection, I immediately asked my mother-in-law to invite her because I knew it would make my mom really happy to meet her. I wanted to surprise her on my wedding day by introducing this special guest. However, when my mom said she wouldn't attend if I didn't ask my stepdad to walk me down the aisle, I kind of exploded. I suppose all the stress was getting to me, so I told her there was no longer any need for her to be present at the wedding. As soon as I said that, she completely changed her tune and began to say that I was being very unfair because she had only said she wouldn't attend to make me ask my stepdad. She didn't even know there would be such a special guest at the wedding, and if she had known, she wouldn't have pressed me to do anything. But I told her that she had already said what she needed to say, and I knew that for her, my stepdad's feelings were more important than what I wanted for my wedding. At that moment, I was really angry, so I couldn't worry about how she felt about all this. I asked her to leave, since I was really busy with work and prepping for the wedding, and I couldn't handle this too. I also told her that at that moment, I was incredibly furious, and I had no intention of listening to her because I was boiling over how she was acting. I just wanted her to leave so I could think about what I wanted to do. Then I stood up, and she did too, but she began to plead with me, saying she took back everything she said and only wanted to be at the wedding now. However, I was in a really bad mood after the fight we just had, so I kept insisting she leave. When she tried to stay and continue the argument, I started yelling at her, telling her that I just wanted her to go because I was very stressed and couldn't deal with this. At that point, I told her that I really didn't care whether she wanted to attend or not. She had put me in a very difficult position and had been very selfish. So now she didn't have the right to make any demands on me. I told her I would think about it and talk to her later, but at that moment, I had nothing more to say to her. And if she tried to keep discussing it, it would only worsen the situation for her because I was getting angrier with her behavior. Eventually, she left, but she looked very unhappy that I had forced her to leave without my fully committing to being open to having her at the wedding. Later, I was finally able to calm down. And after talking to my fiancé on the phone since he was away on a business trip for a week, I decided to think about whether to have her at my wedding or not after this, because that same day, I still felt quite upset with her. The next day, when I woke up, I was about to leave for work and thought about reaching out to my mom a few days later to try to work things out, but she couldn't give me my space to cool down. She showed up at my house in the morning just as I was about to leave for work. She knew my schedule, but still, she came and started asking me if she would still be invited to the wedding or not. Instead of apologizing, she began to try to justify herself to me. She told me that my stepdad had apparently felt very excluded during the wedding preparations, and to encourage him, she had told him that I might ask him to walk me down the aisle so he wouldn't have to worry about it, and that he was also part of the family like anyone else. She also said that he had always felt quite insecure about his place in my life and my uncle's in general, since my uncle seemed to be the man of the family due to how I always treated him. He always felt threatened by him, so that was why she had hinted that I might ask him on my wedding day. Honestly, I can understand the impulse to tell your partner some white lies to make them feel better about certain things, but I don't understand why she had to do it at my expense. Even though she knew I had no intention of doing what she hinted and was fully aware that my stepdad and I were never close, she was practically setting him up for failure by raising his expectations to an unrealistic level. Besides, instead of just apologizing and putting an end to this, she kept trying to tell me that she had insisted on this the other day only because she didn't want her husband to feel bad. She said that after I got married, I would understand why she was acting this way. But her behavior was not a reason for her to be excluded from the guest list for the wedding because, at the end of the day, no matter how much we fought, she was still my mom and deserved to be there at my wedding. I tried to tell her that I would talk about this with her after I returned from work, but she insisted that I had to commit to including her in the wedding. I tried to say yes, just to get her to leave me alone so I could go to work without being late. But then she started back again, saying that she wanted me to at least talk to my stepdad and explain to him why I had chosen my uncle. I didn't want to be the bad guy in this situation because of my decision to ask my uncle to walk me down the aisle. That was when I finally lost my patience, because not only was she delaying me for work, but she was also wasting my time with her questions. I had already told her she was welcome to attend my wedding just to get her off my back, but now she was demanding too much by saying I had to talk to my stepdad. I hadn't made any promises to him. Why should I be the one to talk to him and give him this news? In fact, I didn't even think I needed to tell him anything about the wedding. It's not like I was discussing the plans for my wedding day with all the guests, so why should I give him special treatment? To me, he was just another guest. While we were at the door, I told my mom to leave me alone because I had had enough of her. I told her she was wasting my time, and I could understand that she was really desperate to ensure my stepdad felt validated, but it wasn't my responsibility to validate his feelings. It was hers. I didn't care how she did it, but she wasn't in a position to make any demands of me. She began talking about motherhood, saying she had raised me by herself and that this was the least I could do for her. I decided to confront her and remind her that she had never done it all alone. She wouldn't have made it this far in her career if it hadn't been for all the help she received from my grandparents, my uncle, and his family. So that idea that she had raised me all alone was not something I was willing to accept. Then she started calling me ungrateful, and I finally told her that I had made my decision, and I was now sure that I didn't want her at my wedding. Then I walked away from her, got in my car, and left as fast as I could. It took me a long time to calm down, but even after that, she didn't leave me alone and kept trying to call me while I was on my way to work. As soon as I got to my workplace, I blocked her and tried to focus on the day ahead, but that was useless because when I got home, I realized she was still there waiting at my door. Or at least she came back as soon as she saw me and ran towards me, saying she knew I couldn't be serious about not wanting her at my wedding. But by then, I had had enough, and I told her I was definitely serious. Judging by the way she was acting, it was unlikely that I would change my mind before the wedding. I told her she was acting crazy and needed to leave my yard. Unfortunately, my fiancé was also out at that moment, so I couldn't even count on him to rescue me from the situation. She just stood there trying to reason with me, but I kept telling her to leave me alone. Eventually, I snapped and told her I would call the police if she didn't leave, and I even took out my phone to make sure she knew I was serious. That's when she started crying, saying I was being really cruel and couldn't believe I was treating her that way after all she had done for me. I told her I didn't want things to end this way, but she had been pushing me for the last few days, and now I had no other choice. She had been testing my patience, and I needed her to leave me alone. After crying, she finally left, and it has been a few days since then, but now I feel a little bad. I talked about all this with my fiancé, and he thinks I did what was necessary, but still, I feel bad about it. Neither of us knows how to deal with the situation because the guilt is absolutely overwhelming. He came back last night, and we finally sat down together to talk about what I had been going through. It's obvious I'm very stressed with the wedding preparations, and I've also been taking on a lot of extra workload at work, which might have made me more emotional. He feels the same way, but at the same time, my mom's behavior has been quite unreasonable. We really don't know if what I did was the right thing, or if it was just stress-induced. I don't know if I need to apologize to my mom for acting this way or not. We genuinely have no idea what to do, so we are here asking for your help to resolve this situation. We would appreciate any advice. Update 1, I have a lot to share in this update. First of all, I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post and made me realize that even though my mom's behavior was unacceptable, I was constantly mentioning how stressed I was about work and the wedding, which also wasn't normal. Over the past week and a half, my fiancé and I have reflected a lot and believe we need to significantly scale back our wedding. Of course, I don't mean anything we've already paid for, but mostly the guest list. The number of people we were planning to invite almost hit 200, and we both were really stressed because there were too many people to accommodate and consider their lifestyles. Plus, it would be very costly. After many discussions, we decided to reduce our guest list to the people we truly want at our wedding so we can enjoy the day and spend more time with our loved ones. We really didn't need more than 100 people at our wedding. It simply didn't make sense because many of those people hadn't even spoken to us in years, apart from exchanging a couple of messages on social media. That doesn't justify a wedding invitation, and I think we got a bit carried away with the guest list while planning. But don't worry now. We have that under control. Later this week, we'll finally send out the invitations, and now that only the people I truly want at the wedding will be invited, I feel much less stressed and better overall. Regarding work, I decided to take some time off because I had taken on more than I could handle. I spoke to my employers about it, and they were quite happy that I had decided to lighten my workload. They thought I was doing too much at once and really didn't need to put myself through all that because they also have other capable employees, and I didn't need to shoulder it all by myself. So now I'm much better and plan to have a stress-free wedding. I'm really glad I decided to talk about this in this thread because my fiancé and I can be quite perfectionists, which can stress us out without even realizing it. But this thread and the people who commented on my post made me reconsider everything, and now I feel better. Some guests who definitely won't be on the final list will be my mom and my stepdad. My mom, well, you already read the original post. And a big reason why I concluded that I needed to cut some people from the list I was planning was because of how she was behaving and how she was imposing her unrealistic expectations on me. And my stepdad, by extension, because I just don't feel like having him at the wedding, and without my mom there, I don't think he has any reason to be there either. We haven't spoken since I made her cry the other day, and it has been nice. Honestly, I was tired of her. I also talked to my uncle about her behavior, and he said he wouldn't have had a problem if I replaced him with my stepdad if my mom insisted. He would have felt very bad, but he wouldn't have made a fuss if my stepdad actually wanted to. I explained to him that this was not about what he wanted. It was my wedding, so it was about what I wanted, as it should be. I wanted my uncle to walk me down the aisle, and my mom should have respected that instead of blowing things up and exaggerating it so much that now we aren't even talking just a couple of months from my wedding. In fact, there are only 8 weeks left, and I feel bad that things had to go so wrong. But it's not like I could have avoided it. So I'm just processing all this and coming to terms with it. To be clear, I haven't blocked my mom anywhere. I mean, I had done it, but then I unblocked her that same night, so if she wanted to apologize to me, she could have reached out and apologized. My anger has also faded considerably. She's had enough time to reflect and reconsider her stance in all of this, but none of that has happened, and I'm starting to lose hope that maybe we can reconcile before the wedding. I don't know what else to say, but I really wanted her to be there on my wedding day because, despite everything, she is still my mom. And until now, we've always had a good relationship. I don't know why she's ruining things right now, but I'm really disappointed with how things have turned out. The only thing I can do is cross my fingers that we can sort things out in the next few weeks before the wedding, and hopefully it will all work out fine. Even if it doesn't, I'm still marrying the love of my life, so I know everything will be okay. Update 2. I finally sent out the invitations a few days ago, and just as I said, my mom and stepdad did not receive one. They were furious. I guess they had been asking whether other members of our family received their wedding invitations, and when they found out that most of the people I wanted at my wedding had received theirs, they got enraged. I can understand and excuse my stepdad for being surprised not to be invited, because even though we weren't very close, we were still family. Plus, he didn't know what my mom had done. But I don't understand my mom's reaction. I don't get why she was so surprised because over the last 2 weeks we had hardly spoken. The last time I saw her, we didn't end that meeting on good terms. And I had also informed her well in advance that I wouldn't invite her to the wedding due to her behavior. So I didn't understand why she felt the need to show up at my house in the morning with my stepdad and try to get answers from me. This time they also arrived just as I was about to leave for work, probably on purpose because they wanted to disturb me even more. Fortunately, I had the day off today, so I had all the time in the world to deal with this nonsense. Plus my fiancé was here, unlike the last time this same thing happened. So when they arrived, we invited them in, and even though they had already started shouting at us, we decided to handle this in a dignified and civilized manner because I didn't want to start shouting back and turn this into a screaming match. That just wouldn't make sense. So I let them express all their disappointment out loud before starting to talk. Once my mom and stepdad finished expressing their disappointment quite loudly, I must say I first addressed my stepdad. I explained that there were several reasons why they both hadn't been invited to the wedding. I was sure he didn't know this because my mom wanted to look good here and made it seem like everything was my fault without mentioning what she had done. A glance at his face told me that my mom hadn't told him anything about what she had done to create the situation. Then I filled him in on how she had insisted that I replace my uncle with him to accompany me down the aisle, and then I explained exactly why I didn't want to do that. He had never made much effort to build a strong relationship with me, and even if he had, it wouldn't have mattered because my uncle has been there for me since I was a little girl, so it's a completely different situation. I had hoped my mom would understand this at some point, but she never did, and didn't respect what I said. So I had already told her that I didn't want him at my wedding, and it was time he knew too. From then on, he remained silent because he didn't know this part of things. Then I turned to my mom and started talking to her, telling her that she already knew my decision earlier, so there really wasn't any need to make such a fuss about it now. She hadn't bothered to fix the situation by apologizing to me, even though I hadn't specifically blocked her, because I expected her to come to me at least to tell me that she understood where I was coming from, and that she wouldn't pressure me to do something I didn't want to do. However, that message never came, and now she wouldn't be attending my wedding either. I thought I was being fair, but she still kept yelling at me, telling me I was an ungrateful daughter and that I deserved better to make me feel guilty, but I only felt irritated after a point. I suppose it was obvious that my fiancé and I weren't interested in talking to her, so my stepdad grabbed her arm and told her that we weren't even worth her time. Then they left, and after they left, I finally blocked both of them. To be honest, I am relieved this is over. Now I hope they leave me in peace after this. Update 3. There are 3 weeks left until my wedding, and I have to bring you a new update about a talk I had with my mom. She came to my house again yesterday, and she did it alone. She wanted us to talk from a mother-to-daughter perspective and to allow her to fix the situation. She apologized for everything that had happened, and even for the things she said. She really wanted to restore our relationship. But I guess those were just empty words because what happened next didn't align with that apology. She told me that she was okay with my uncle walking me down the aisle and that he could do it, but that I shouldn't take away her opportunity to meet the person she admired so much. If you remember from my first post, among the guests was a friend of my mother-in-law who is in real estate, and I was going to invite her to connect with my mom. But after everything that happened and the reduction of the list, I didn't see the point in inviting her. I mean, my mom wasn't going to be there, and I needed to have a shorter list. But my mom didn't know that. I told her that since we had scaled back the wedding after everything that happened, which was partly her fault, we hadn't sent out an invitation. She looked at me in disbelief for a few seconds until she reacted and said that she couldn't do that to her. She said she really hoped to meet her to do business and keep thriving in her career. My response was that since she had apologized, she could come with her husband, but my uncle would still walk me down the aisle. As for the special guest, I told her it was too late to invite her and that the preparations were too advanced to make changes now. That's when she went crazy again and began to insult me. I told her it seemed like her profession was more important than my wedding, and that if anyone needed to be blamed, it was her since her tantrums caused these changes. Furthermore, she wasn't invited after all. Although she didn't want to reason and kept raising her voice while I raised mine, telling her to leave already, even though she didn't. In the end, I threatened to call the police and started dialing when she heard me talking to the operator. She grabbed her purse and left. There's no doubt this woman has a lot of nerve because this is my wedding, and up to now, all I've heard are requests and complaints in true narcissistic style. Her priorities are very clear. So, in the future, I won't be asking my mother-in-law to help her contact this person. First, because my mom doesn't deserve it, and second, because my mother-in-law shouldn't ruin her reputation by associating with my mom. Update 4, I got married 2 days ago, and everything went as I had expected, as I had been planning for months. I think it was an excellent idea to cut down the guest list because we really got to talk to everyone present and spend time with them. It wasn't too crowded, and everything was really nice and dreamy. I ended up missing my mom a bit despite everything, but my uncle and husband were there to console me, saying they would always be there for me. That made me feel a little better about the situation, and eventually, I forgot about it when I hit the dance floor. In summary, we had a fantastic time, and I really don't regret anything. Now, my husband and I will be going on our honeymoon in a couple of days, and I know it will be absolutely perfect. Update 5. We are back from my honeymoon, and when we went to my mother-in-law's house to catch up and tell them about our vacation, she told us something about my mom. She hadn't said anything before because she knew about our problem and didn't want to ruin the honeymoon. But now that we were back, she told us that my mom had called her wanting to ask her for a favor to introduce her to this person she was so interested in. If you read a previous update, she even went crazy when she found out I didn't invite her since that was apparently her only intention after all. But my mother-in-law knows how unhinged my mom can get, so she told her she wasn't going to do any of that and then hung up. I can't blame my mother-in-law. She knows how crazy my mom can be, and introducing her to someone important could be a problem. But she also did it as a favor to me since we get along very well with my mother-in-law, and she supports me in everything she can.